I think we're live. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Hello, Iyas. How are you? I mean,
Hello.
I don't want to ask this question, how are you? Because we're in the situation we're in. We're very, very grateful, happy to have you all connected with us this evening. We are here for the third episode of our solidarity sessions. This is a collaboration between Rabet by the Palestine Institute for Public Diplomacy with the UK Palestine Solidarity Campaign. This event actually is, this show that we have created on YouTube, and I think we will let people come in and join us bit by bit. This event, this show is really, we created it to make sure that we can remain hopeful and we can bring action into our words, into our pain, into our grief, into our determination. And so this is meant to be a show to hear from Palestinians, and to basically also provide our audience, our listeners, with actions, mobilization, and things that you can all concretely do with the situation. So we're here tonight with all heavy hearts. The situation, the genocide is ongoing. We're still in a very dire urgency situation where we need to end the genocide. And so we're here tonight because this is the commemoration of the Nakba week. And so, Iyas, I will let you say a few words about that before we can welcome each of our guests to share their testimonies and great pieces.
Thank you, Ines. And it is, we were talking earlier about how complex a question to ask any Palestinian today. How are you? It's a very difficult question to answer. I am Iyas Al-Qasim. I'm the vice chair of the Palestine Solidarity Campaign, and I am a Palestinian from Nablus via Croydon in the UK. And so that question, the title of tonight's event of what does the ongoing Nakba mean to you, can really be answered for me by Croydon. Those of you from London, from the UK, will know quite what a burden that is to bear. I would not have been in Croydon if it hadn't been for the Nakba. But on a serious note, that does reflect our diaspora. In 2021, I buried my father, Anis Al-Qasim, who was born in Hadis, just outside of Nablus, at the age of 94. And I buried him in Valencia, in Spain. And a couple of years earlier, I had buried a very dear friend of his, Abdul Rahim, who is from Safad. And we buried him in Toronto. And Helmi Samara, a couple of years before that, from Tul Karim. All of these were friends from the Rashidiyya school in Jerusalem. Helmi I buried in Wallington in the UK, and he was born in Tul Karim. All buried several thousand miles away from their homes and where they wanted to be. So when we talk about an ongoing Nakba, that's where it ended for them. But at least for them, they made it into their 80s or 90s. We know that these last very few months, there are people being buried who are days old in Gaza, who've stayed there, who've been at their homes, who've stayed in Palestine. We know the names of Ali Abdel Noor al-Suri or Mahmoud Wadi Khalid al-Baba, who didn't make their first year. They didn't see their first year before their deaths, their killings in Gaza. And this is not to mention the children who at age 5 are telling doctors in Médecins Sans Frontières that they wish they'd been killed. We talk about the Nakba as though it was a point in time, but it is very much ongoing, as we're seeing now. But even before October the 7th, it's been ongoing for the whole of the 76 years. It's very real, and it's very human. We see the numbers, we see the stats, we see the human rights violations, we see all of these things that are essential. but behind each one of those is a human, like Ali Abdel Noor or Mahmoud Khalid al-Baba. And so we're very privileged today to actually have with us guests who are going to share their very human stories of what the ongoing Nakba means to you. And I'd like to introduce the first one, who is Amal Shurrab. Amal Shurrab is a digital marketing specialist. She is the CEO of Chapeau Marketing Agency from Gaza. And she is speaking to us from Egypt, from where she escaped the genocide. Amal, it's a pleasure, it's a strange word to use, but I'm pleased that you're here with us to share with you your experience of what the ongoing Nakba means to you. Are you with us, Amal?
Okay, thank you for preparing that event in order to let us share our experience in that, let's say, that genocide. To be honest, when you are talking about the Nakba, it's not only about 48. We lived a lot of wars before, and we faced a lot of things before. But to be honest, this is the most hard time that we are facing something like you cannot even describe, you cannot even know anything, what's happening around me, how I will survive to see the things that they are around. I always think that this is maybe because I'm still a new mom. When you have a baby, she's only 6 months old. When you have a baby that you are taking care of in that bad situations, I don't know, maybe it's because you are not the one person that you have the responsibility on yourself only. You have a lot of things to do with your baby. I haven't lived anything with her. I don't know, maybe it's written in color, to be honest. But you say that you don't even know how can I feed her well, how can I take care of her health, a lot of things. Maybe I'm thinking that I'm one of the luckiest people that I could escape to Egypt. Let's talk about December, 14th of December, okay? Um, I went there because of my brother-in-law. He was injured in his arm, and I get out from Gaza with my husband and my baby. I left my pets behind. I left my mother, father, my sisters, my brothers. All of my family are still there in Gaza, and I'm in Egypt alone. I don't know anything about the community. I don't know anything about the people here. I don't know how to go, how to have my things, everything. You cannot imagine how I feel shocked when I saw the vegetables, the fruits, the molds, the buildings, everything around. It's something like, okay, we had everything before, but now we have nothing. I'm going to start my life again and again and again. And this is not the first time, but it's the hardest time that I have a family with me. I'm not alone. Okay. Another thing, we built our company, Chapeau Planet, okay, in Gaza, and I'm the CEO of it. I'm a partner with my husband at the company, okay. We lost our office from day one of the war. From the day one, you know what mean day one? Something disappointed that okay, I'm losing my company now. My team is all of my team are still we are all motivated that we can do a lot of things together, and like this. But until now we are all shocked, surprised. We are really shocked about everything that happened with us. Okay, after I came here, I tried to get back to my work. I tried to work again. I tried to connect my clients, but I'm stressed. My family is there and I'm here and I cannot do anything. I cannot work. I cannot be focused with everything. I cannot have let's talk have a nice time with my baby. She's now 1 year old. She was 6 months in the war. So this is not fair, okay. And after this, we are trying to rebuild everything again. We are trying to relocate our company. Alhamdulillah, my family now here in Egypt, so maybe it will be easier to me to live with them again at the same place, to make sure that everything will be fine with them. I don't know. I wish, inshallah, that everything ends soon. Inshallah, everybody have that chance to live his life with the peace. He can build their own business. They can live everything that they want. They can have a nice food, a nice place to live. You cannot imagine the place that I was living in. There is an iron is above me every night. I think that okay, if that iron is on me, he's going to cut me. It's going to cut me. Okay, there's a lot of things that I cannot face. I cannot even think of it. A lot of nightmares. It's really too hard to describe, hard to tell about. Alhamdulillah, now I'm trying to live. Whatever is the case, I'm trying to do something for my team in Gaza and my team here in Egypt, to try to relocate everything, to try, inshallah, to make everything feel okay for my family, for my friends, for my other family in law. Inshallah, everything will be fine, and inshallah, everything will end soon. And that's all. That's everything I can say about.
Thank you, Amal. This is so powerful, and I want to say really thank you, because you're very brave to come here. As you said, it's
Thank you.
just telling your story, continue to speak up, be in front of an audience. This takes energy, and this takes courage.
Yeah.
And I think you have a baby to take care of. I'm also a new mom, so I can't imagine. My son was born just at the end of September, just before the genocide. And I've been thinking of you, and all the other moms. You are a survivor. You are really a survivor.
Thank you.
So, I
Thank
mean,
you.
really, يعطيك العافية. So, Chapeau Planet is the company of Amal. If you need marketing services, all of the Gaza people need your help, not just humanitarian help. Amal continues to run her company in exile after having lost everything. I think, Amal, that's so brave, because you want to actually continue your passion. You want to continue your work. As you say, you want to, have a semblance of normal where nothing is normal and your family is still trapped. So really thank you. And, we'll
Welcome.
continue this
Thank you.
conversation. I hope people follow you, and we'll definitely continue the conversation with you and to engaging. Again, thank you so much for
Thank you.
for
Thank
being
you
here with
for
us.
letting me share everything about my experience. And thank you for everything.
Amal, what I think also is very important for everybody to hear and see from you, whereas Palestinians were very often painted either as victims or as fighters. And the reality is we are absolutely victims of gross injustice, and we are all fighters. Poetry, we're going to have poetry later. Poetry for us is a
Yes.
manner of resistance. It's a form of resistance. Working is a form of resistance. But the
Yes.
reality is we are MDs of marketing agencies as well. We are accountants, we are street sweepers, we are lawyers, we are humans in all of their richness.
Yes. Sure.
Any
Sure.
other human.
Yeah.
And I
I'm always saying to the people here, I'm not supposed to be superhero, and no, I'm still a human, and I have feelings. I have everything. Okay, but work is work, business is business. I don't love to be let's life will continue anyway, but we are trying to do something for the people there. We are trying to help people there. This is why I'm motivating myself and motivating my team here in Egypt, in order, yes, let's go on our way.
Yeah, Allah yatik al-afiyah. God
Allah
bless you
yatik.
for the work that you do, for that you continue to do. I am pleased that you're safe. Obviously, we all hope that all of the rest of us are also very safe very soon.
Thank you. I appreciate this. Thank you.
This ongoing.
Take care, Amal.
Take care. Thank you.
We are going to move on to our second guest, who is going to give testimony, who is Nida Ibrahim. Nida is a reporter for Al Jazeera English in Palestine. Nida, welcome, and we'd love to hear your story and what the Nakba means to you.
Thank you for having me. As a child, I was always speaking a lot, and I was always the person who wants to hear the stories and wants to repeat them. So I was not interested in news. I was, wanting to stay away from the sadness, from all the stories that, traumatized our generation. But as I started to get older and older, I started getting interested in hearing what my grandparents had to say. And I felt like we could reshape the story, and I could be a part of how we can rewrite the story of Palestinians. And like you rightly just said, it's not just about victims or heroes, it's about the humans who are trying to do everything they can to stay present, to stay steadfast. And that's exactly what I've seen when I became a journalist and I started going around all areas of Palestine. I didn't want to tell sad stories, but unfortunately, you have to report on bereaved families, on grieving mothers, on children who have no hope in a better future. But at the same time, you see those people. For example, I met Ala Dali in Gaza. He was a cyclist. As he says to me at the time, my dream was in my legs. But he went to the right of return marches in Gaza near the bordering area, and he had been shot and he lost his leg. And instead of just, accepting this as a sad reality as it is, he started cycling with one leg. And he wanted to join the Paralympics. And at the same report that I was doing, I also met Dr. Adnan Al-Bursh, who was treating him. And this is the doctor who we sadly lost in one of Israel's prisons just recently, just a few kilometers away from us here in Aufar prison near Ramallah, where I am right now. So again, like the pain, the sadness, the happiness, the endurance are all marred together. And as much as I tried to keep myself away from the Nakba testimonies because they were so dark, I kind of naively told myself, maybe this is something in history. Now we are in the 2000s, things like that are not going to happen in the same severity. I just wanted to kind of shield myself from all that pain. But, when I go to any community, the stories may be different, but the thread is the same. It's displacement. It's making life so difficult for Palestinians that even if they're not kicked out of their homes, that they might say, you know what, that's it for me. I'm just going to leave. And we've seen, and I've been speaking to some of my friends here who are terribly scared, who want to leave. And I'm like, you know what, you're going to hear it from me and many others. We're not leaving. We're here to stay. And the goal is to get Palestinians out of their lands. And in some places, it kind of succeeded partially. For example, the Bedouin communities that are near the Jordan Valley, that are near Ramallah, they told me that they had to leave because, yes, they might be losing the lands over which they've stayed for decades, and they are descendants, and they are refugees, and they are descendants of people who, witnessed Nakba firsthand. But fast forward to the third and fourth generations, now they're being forcibly displaced. But the father of small children, one of them is an 8-month-old at the time, he was saying that, I ran away with the most precious, which is my children. So the Nakba is not something that, that happened in history. It's something that we continue to see in different forms, in raids, in arrests, and displacement of Palestinian settler attacks. But what really keeps me going is the endurance of Palestinians who are steadfast, who are just, hanging on the faith, on the truth, on the fact that they are the people of the land. This is part of, what gives me hope every day, covering all these sad and tragic news. And maybe what helps me is that I come from the town of Bet Sahur, and it was just before I was born when the town has organized civil disobedience. And if anyone is watching is interested in that story, there has been a great movie done about that. It's called The Wanted 18. I encourage you to watch it. It's, you know, our story is not always about suffering. Yes, it is very dark these days, but I take courage and I take hope from all the people I report on who are just amazing, and they're going to continue, you know, staying on their land and say we love this, we love our Palestine, we have nowhere else to go, and this is where we're going to stay.
Thank you so much, Nida. And I think you said I think in your testimony, you're really showing that the Nakba is almost a condition of our struggle, that there is the catastrophe and there is the loss, but also pendant to that is the sumud, is the resilience, is the fighting, is the you know, that we need to carry on. And I think this is what makes the Nakba structural as a both a tragedy, but something that makes us what we are, and makes us as you say, go on to stay. So really, thank you so much. You're also, make us all proud as reporting on Palestine every day on screen. You must be super exhausted because we've seen you, ins and out on the ground. So really keep up. Thank you so much.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
And thank you for not just sharing your testimony, but sharing such human stories of other people's testimonies who aren't here with us today. And I think for me, that's one of the most important things about your voice as a journalist and your voice as a Palestinian journalist, is the ability to convey some of those very human stories. I keep coming back to the word, I can't use it enough, human stories of what it is to be a Palestinian going through the Nakba. So Nida, thank you so much for joining us today. And for sharing with us your testimony.
It's a privilege and a responsibility, and I hope I can keep telling it. And this is just not to forget our late Palestinian journalist Shireen Abu Akleh, who was killed and targeted by the Israeli army while she was trying to tell the Palestinian story to the world.
We couldn't help but see her face behind you, Nida. So yes, thank you for bringing that to us.
Thank you.
We are going to move on. I mentioned earlier that when we were speaking to Amal about the fact that as Palestinians, we are everything. We are like all other humanity. We have, we have accountants and we have fraudsters, and quite often they come in the same person, just like everyone else. But we also have our artists and our poets. And I'm delighted now to introduce our poet, Dana Dajani. Dana Dajani is a Palestinian writer and performer, and she's known for her theatrical style of spoken word poetry, which focuses very much on, no surprise, on the themes of social justice. She's joining us today from Doha in Qatar with 2 poems, and the first is Love Letters from Palestine. Dana, thank you for joining us. I'm looking forward to hearing this.
Thank you, Iyas and Inez, and thank you to Amal and Nida also for sharing your testimonials. I feel privileged to be able to share my story among you tonight as well. When I wanted to write about Palestine 12 years ago, I felt like my own experience as a Palestinian in diaspora was quite limited. And so I created a character, the character of a Hajj, using my theatrical background. And through this Hajj, she would tell us her life story, which is the history of the occupation of Palestine. And that is this poem, Love Letters from Palestine, which I will share with you now. Just a minute to get into character. They call me Nakba named for the catastrophe born on the same day as I. Welcome 76 years fighting the threat of genocide has left me unspooled, like the thread I use to embroider pillows and thobes with passion and the hope that one day I will again feel at home on this land that my grandfather tilled with his hands under the umbrage of a gold leaf dome. And all I've inherited is internal displacement, like my gut in my throat when I hear of olive trees older than you and me by centuries, uprooted like so many families, relinquished to refugee camps where there is no defense. Though in the West Bank, we live restrained by a fence, thick enough to drown out the sounds of our sorrows and muffle the marching beat of endless feet, martyred in neat piles which the media sweeps so slyly under the rug of humanity. The insanity of your alleged birthright Israelis minting fresh citizens they import entitlement and market it as democracy. And though your apartheid apathy acknowledges 1 million of my friends as second-class citizens among you, millions still are caught in between, unaccounted for in your governmental scheme. And that doesn't include the millions still who can only dream of one day reclaiming their ancestry. Frozen in the struggle to remain Palestinian and present to retain the essence of الزعتر والزيتون اللوز والليمون. In the spirit of those lost, the spring of aching jaws letting cries of freedom ring through bullet-battered walls. But the numbers dead here still spiral, like some stupefying defect. 1 missing, 2 lost, 3 buried, 5, 8, 11, 13. Welcome, we've grown accustomed to this pattern of killing, but when does the sequence end? Tell me, Israel, through which ethical lens does your ethnic cleansing make sense? The irony is a bit too much for me to tolerate. While your IDF soldiers are toasting l'chaim, Palestinian children are dying. Our sons and daughters living on salt and water, and I don't mean tears alone. So tell me how, ya Dani Ayalon, can you deny that Palestine ever existed? How can you say with a straight face that before 48 there was nothing here but the potential for a Jewish state? Before you fed us your hate, welcome, we ate like kings in the Fertile Crescent. Doctors, lawyers, and musicians, our land was golden, the most bountiful and open. You've defiled our stunning cities and our pristine history, and yet I'll grant you amnesty. You orphan-making orphans, because you have never known the sanctuary of a home, and it's no wonder you want our land for your own. Our mountains and coastline, lush green and stones which still stand to rebel against your bombshells, are a sight to remind you that your might does not negate our right to life. And I must admit, I was jealous when you sent love letters to Iran. It made me wonder, how did I ever treat you wrong? It made me wonder what possesses a throng of Americans to suit up and serve to protect another homeland which they don't deserve. With only weapons in the water, only bullets in the bread, I was knocked out from rage, stars of David round my head. Last time I yelled, hey, Ariel Pharaoh, will you let my people go? Because this land is holy, and was so before your uranium blasts. And at the end of the day, we both share the same Semitic past. But in the 1950s, your discriminatory policies helped you confiscate our land, classifying us as absentees. Though we never left sight of home, it was only out of reach as we stood helpless, caught in your checkpoints, present absentees, and watched as Jewish families commandeered Palestinian homes with food still cooking hot on the stove, beds made and bills paid and pets waiting on the floor, sniffing out the stranger who just walked in the door. We never abandoned our Palestine, and now as refugees we carry her spirit internationally. And Israel, we refute your dumbing down of this occupation to call it a dispute. though it's not just a semantic issue, so I will continue to resist amidst your tanks and settlements, separating, segregating in your racist strategy. Like Netanyahu, who chose you to inflict so much suffering unto me? Israel, I dream of peace, which is no substitute for justice. Israel with your barbed wire hugs, and Israel with your uranium love, and Israel with your bulletproof apathy, Israel with your affinity for make-believe. Israel, I am waiting for your liberating compassion, for you to discover your love of Palestinian Bedouins and Bashas, for this love cannot be contained, which is why love doesn't die when bodies don't remain, which is why love is all that's left, though my heart has hardened like the stone pit of an olive. Don't you see, Israel? The only way I know to give you my very best is to rip open my vest, reach into my chest, dislodge this now calcified organ, kiss my fist, and with a wish, send it flying over the wall towards your settlements, which haven't settled anything at all, and hope you receive its good intent. You see, I don't resent you. We'd never move past this if I did. My life is over. I just want a better future for my kids. This rock was never meant for anything more than to knock some sense into you. Why continue war? We are one human race. There are no walls from space. And if you could just see my face, the daughter of a catastrophe, perhaps it may inspire in you some humanity. Israel, all I do is give you time. But until you get in line, I will keep throwing these love letters from Palestine. So this is the poem. Thank you. I wanted to say something, which is, when I first wrote this poem 12 years ago, the Hajj was 64 years old. And year after year, كبرنا sawa, we got older together. 64, 65, she's 76 years old, and I didn't anticipate this would be such a painful side effect of having written this poem, to hear her plea fall on deaf ears year after year. But I keep repeating her story to preserve our history, to make sure it's not rewritten, to commemorate our ancestors, and inshallah it will be heard, and Palestine will be free. I want to leave you guys with a question to commemorate our ancestors, which is, if there's anybody on this call whose ancestor was affected by the Nakba, write their name in the chat, write the village that they're from. Let's take the time to commemorate them this evening. Thank you very much.
Dana, it's impossible to follow that. The emotions that you've stirred up, and such a range of emotions, with that evocation of the range of emotions that every Palestinian pretty much feels every day. It's not just the grief, it's not just the anger, it's also the resistance, it's also the steadfastness, but it's also the joy we live as Palestinians. And listening to you there, it is incredibly moving. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. It leaves me without words, and I think you say you hope your words don't fall on deaf ears. I suspect there are several hundred non-deaf ears who've already heard this tonight, and as this will stay up on our channels, I think there will be several thousand who will deservedly hear the words that you've just shared with us. Thank you so much for doing that.
Thank you, Dana. Thank you so much. And I'm someone who's now sitting in Palestine, and my teta never made it back to Palestine. I got the chance to get a passport that allows me to enter. But your entire poem, I was thinking of my teta, who is probably everyone who was listening to you was thinking of either their teta or their auntie or the women in Gaza هلا, what are they going through, and the ongoing Nakba they're going through under the bombs. And thank you so much. This is very powerful. We'll hear another poem from you before the end of the event, so do stay on, everyone, because this is absolutely amazing. We've also we'll put the website of Dana on the chat. I'm particularly pleased tonight because we have such a powerhouse of women as guests. I'm sorry, ES, but this is there is our generation of women is just absolutely amazing, and I'm glad that we have actually 5 of them tonight. And so we'll continue to hear from amazing women, and because we are now going to welcome our next guests. And our next guest is Ghada Majadli. Ghada, she is an activist. She's a researcher and academic. Ghada is a policy analyst for the policy network Al Shabaka, a policy network that I'm also a member of. You should follow their work. And Ghada, you grew up in the lands of 48, so we really want to hear your testimony of what the ongoing Nakba means to you. Thank you, Ghada, for being with us.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation. I'm pleased to be here with everyone. And I'm speaking from Haifa, and I want to apologize in advance because I'm going to take you from the poetic atmosphere that we had with Dana. It was very powerful, to a more historical, political context before I move to my personal experience. So I'm going to start with just giving a brief, very short explanation about the situation for the 48 Palestinians or Palestinian citizens of Israel since the Nakba in 48. And I want to start by saying that there has been an estimated 146,000 Palestinians who remained in their towns or were internally displaced in what has become the state of Israel. And they were subjected to military rule for nearly 19 years. They were denied the freedom of movement and had to obtain permits to exit their towns, exactly as the situation in the Gaza Strip and in the West Bank since the occupation in 67. They were impoverished, and most importantly, they were disconnected from the rest of the Palestinian people and the Arab world until Israel occupied the West Bank and Gaza in 1967. So actually, in the years following the Nakba, Palestinians who are now citizens of Israel, which Dana mentioned briefly in her poem, were reduced as a group with national aspiration to a third of their original number. Some were displaced, internally displaced, lost their family members, separated from their families, and eventually were subjected to a military rule, as I mentioned. There are today almost 2 million Palestinians who are citizens of Israel, and there were historical attempts to reduce the interrelationship between them and Israel to matters of equal citizenship and discrimination. And I'm sorry that I'm going to be more like a political analysis, but this is a huge part of our ongoing Nakba. And this was in order to erase their national identity through deliberate policies. Because after all, Israel has always seen its Palestinian citizens as a threat, and in times of political tension, and more so since the 7th of October, as enemies. So Israel tried to turn us into Israelis or ethnic and religious groups without any political or national affiliation. So for example, for those who don't know, we study the Israeli curriculum. We don't learn about the history of our people or the Nakba. We learn about the establishment of Israel, the independence, the Holocaust, and we need to make an effort in order to be well informed about our own history. Well, Israel also bet on the memory of Palestinians and expected us as the entire Palestinian people to forget. But the third and fourth generation of the Palestinians also in Israel maintained their identity, especially since Israel has never halted using violence and disposition against Palestinians, also citizens of Israel, in addition to structural racism and discrimination, which also sabotaged its plans to assimilate Palestinians, citizens of Israel, into Israeli society. But apart from this, there was a significant part in the fact that Palestinian citizens of Israel, including myself, have connections and family ties with Palestinians everywhere. For example, my family from my father's side comes from Asqalan, today's Ashkelon, the same town from which Palestinians who became refugees in refugee camps in Gaza, like Jabalia, were expelled in 48 and where genocide has been taking place over the last 7 months. My grandmother's family from Ainibta, near Tulkarem, the majority of her family members were expelled or fled in 1967 to Jordan, to Kuwait, and the US. My grandparents from my mother's side come from villages near Haifa, which were also destroyed during the Nakba, and they never visited there because today there are kibbutzim for Jewish only on these lands. So a huge part of why we, the third and fourth generation of Palestinian in Israel, maintained our Palestinian identity is also the narration of the stories and events of the Nakba by the first generation, which in many cases took them many years before they could speak about what they witnessed. This had a huge impact back then and still has an impact today. For example, I first heard about the Tantura massacre from my grandmother more than 15 years ago, where she recalled images of the women and children who were loaded into trucks and brought to Fredis, the village where she was born and raised. She was maybe 9 or 10 years old, and since then, this is a story that we heard countless times in every family occasion. So what I want to say is that our past as Palestinian citizens of Israel, regardless of Israel attempts to reduce us to citizens or to isolate us from the rest of the Palestinian people, and also our destinies are intertwined with the rest of the Palestinians. And I think that everyone here understands this, and maybe perhaps one of the most forgetting or neglected facts concerning the Nakba, which is hugely part of Israel's policies, is that Palestinian citizens of Israel were also an integral part of the catastrophe and are still dealing with its consequences today. And more so since the 7th of October, where Palestinian citizens of Israel were denied any opportunity to protest against the genocide in Gaza, because all of anti-war and anti-genocide were sanctions. They were silenced and intimidated. And this was mainly the first time that Palestinians in Israel couldn't be part of a larger things in one of the most critical and maybe dark times for all of the Palestinians, and especially in Gaza.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rada. Yes, you wanna react?
Thank you, Rada. No, I do, but I have two reactions in essence. One of them is to you, I have to say, and the reaction is, don't apologize to me for having our women here speaking. You can't apologize for something that is a privilege for me, and I feel genuinely honored to just be allowed on this roster to speak. But I will say it isn't just women of this generation or of your generations, because they do stand on the shoulders of the women of several, at least 2 or 3 previous generations, who have all made an incredible mark on us. But to Rada, thank you so much. You also started all this with an apology that you were going to give us the politics and the human rights. But the reality is every human story sits within a context. And for us, that context is political. It It's a context of an environment of the denial of our human rights. It's a context of restrictions, of blockades, of well, more than that, of a denial of our culture and our history. And we all know that, you know, the elimination of history and culture of an indigenous people is a tried and tested strategy of every colonial enterprise that has ever existed. So when you talk about what you went through at school, that's a strategy. That is the strategy that every colonial power has always adopted, because you rewrite history for the new generations. So thank you very much for putting that, and obviously then adding humanizing with the context of your own family within that as well.
Thank you for having
Thank
me.
you, Ghada. Yeah, I mean, you know, my husband is from 48 too, and I think you said two very important things, and I think two things that a lot of people don't necessarily understand, even Palestinians, right? Me who grew up in exile, or even people under the occupation in the West Bank, that you had to face, you stayed, you survived, but you had to basically, you know, and you still have to kind of live under the colonial society, with their flags in your face, with their curriculum and the school system, and like trying to be erased, you know, like with that project of erasure every day, every single day. Not them, you know, as the boot on your neck as the occupation, or from afar as in a refugee camp. It's a very particular way of being colonized that I think is very hard to understand. And the second thing that is linked to that you said is really important is, you know, how that generation who survived the Nakba didn't want to speak. They were so traumatized and living under this colonial ruling, right? This kind of Jewish state that doesn't want them, and still doesn't want you. And, you know, the inability to speak out, and how that has affected, you know, the generations after. So these are really two important things that you know is important to keep in mind in understanding what the ongoing Nakba is, I think, against the Palestinians. Thank you so much, Ghada. Do follow the work, read the analysis that Ghada is putting out. Thank you for your work, Ghada, and thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
We're going to welcome now our almost last testimony. We'll also have Ben Jamal, who's you know, from PSC and one of our partners. We have now the testimony from a great friend, Sarah Husseini. Sarah Husseini is from Jerusalem. She grew up in the UK. She's based in London, where she's speaking from today. And she is the director of the British Palestinian Committee, an advocacy organization. And we wanted Sarah to also bring her testimony from yet again another of the, you know, so diverse Palestinian perspectives. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, thank you, Ines. First of all, sending love and solidarity to all of our speakers tonight, particularly Amal, and to all of our people in Gaza. You know, there really aren't words for what you're facing, and I'm really in awe of your strength. So just to say that, first of all. As a Palestinian from Jerusalem, but unable to grow up there, and with a mother from Leicester here in the UK, and yes, I'm not sure how Leicester stacks up against Croydon. Definitely more solidarity here, potentially. But Nakba Day for me has really always evoked a double layer of emotion. On the one hand, it's a sober commemoration of one of the darkest periods in our history as Palestinians, and the continuity of that to the present day. And at the same time, it's a stark reminder that from that point to this, perhaps the only thing as consistent as the campaign of colonization and dispossession in Palestine, you know, now in the form of this live stream genocide, has been Britain's role in facilitating and supporting that campaign. So today I thought what I'd do is just highlight a little tiny bit of this history through the diary of my great-grandfather. And this is from even before the Nakba, which, as Dana pointed out in her poem, you know, is often so denied that there was even a history before the Nakba for Palestinian society. So it's Hussein Fakhri al-Khalidi, who was the mayor of Jerusalem in the 1930s during the British occupation of Palestine. And on the 1st of October 1937, his daughter, 10-year-old Layla, who is also my grandmother, woke him up to tell him the police were at his door. Within an hour, he was taken away and exiled to the Seychelles, along with 3 other Palestinian leaders, as part of British efforts to crush Palestinian resistance to occupation. Of his arrest, he remembers, and I'm quoting, "Wahida, who's his wife, began weeping. I tried to say a few consoling words. The children with open eyes were around us, wondering what it was all about. I turned to Adil, my eldest, and told him that now his turn had come. I told him that I depended upon him to take my place at home and be a good boy. Then I had to say goodbye and kissed my wife and children again and again. When I sat in the car and waved my hand to them for the last time, as they were standing on the veranda, I felt a lump in my throat and tears rolled up from my eyes." Now, from exile, my great-grandfather followed every bit of news from Palestine. He documents in very great detail in this diary that he writes in English, and he documents all the news coming from the rest of the world, and particularly the news coming out of Westminster and out of Britain as the colonial power. On the 26th of October in 1937, he references a discussion in Parliament, and he notes the words of Ormsby Gore, who is the then unashamedly titled Colonial Secretary. And he says that these words, quote, "are practically the same as those he used to utter last year in the House of Commons. Can't the British authorities see the futility of what they're doing?" he asks. And I'm just always struck at how references like this, reported in 1937, could just have easily been reported last week. Then on November 2nd, 1937, which my grandfather notes as Balfour Declaration Day, he reports that, quote, "there are a few items of news this morning. A question in Parliament about demolition of homes as a punitive measure, and a reply from Ormsby Gore that it is not intended to withdraw such a measure at present." Now, Palestinians will immediately recognise this cruel and unjust tactic of collective punishment. But I wonder, given the omission of this history from mainstream discourse, particularly in the UK, how many people will know of the direct adoption of such a tactic from British colonial rule and into Israeli colonial rule. It's really tempting then to look at this history in despair, especially during the unspeakable atrocities that our people are facing in Gaza right now. But I try to take heart in 2 things. One is the value of understanding the British role in all of this, is understanding why it's so important that we here in the UK know that history and use it to mobilise in standing up for what's right, and for holding British leaders accountable and other governments for, well, the British government really, for their long-standing, ongoing, and this really unique form of complicity in the atrocities being committed by the State of Israel. For as long as the British governments have tried to obscure and deflect this history, the British people have always known better. And so it's really just a plea to keep protesting, keep writing to MPs, keep supporting our students. It's all such important work, and really important that we keep doing it. And then just finally, as a Palestinian, I look at this history and remember that just as my great-grandfather and his generation existed and resisted almost a century ago, and despite incredible oppression and great lengths from some of the world's most powerful forces, we, Palestinians across Palestine and in exile, continue to exist and continue to resist today. And one day we will return. Thank you.
Thank you so much for Sarah, for sharing such a personal and moving part of your history. I think we all, Ines, I'm sure you're the same, we all have stories from our parents, from our grandparents, of what happened through the 1920s, 1930s, and 1940s. And it's remarkable, as you point out, Sarah, quite how many of those stories are, or certainly the excuses and the ruses that are being used by the West are the same as were being used in those days. And it is impossible to forget the UK's role, but it is also incredibly heartening, as you alluded to, see people's responses on the street. Quite literally over a million, the millions of people who have come out in support of Palestine on the streets in the UK. And if I may go back to your start, that includes Croydon, where we have one of our newest USC branches is in Croydon. Croydon is active.
That's great to hear. I didn't know anything about Croydon, so that was not I just know that we've got good solidarity in Leicester. So I'm glad to hear that, yes, it's really good news.
Thank you, Sada. And I think you brought a piece of our history that's also, I think, less known to people, is the Great Revolution of 1936.
Yep.
This is a very important piece of our history. And as you said, I think although the Nakba is not just 48. The Nakba is structural to our struggle, but there has been actually, sort of a building up to the Nakba, and all of the 30s have been extremely important in our history, and also need to be understood because the Palestinians have resisted Zionism before 48 and this deflagration, and are still today. And I think, you come from a very also peculiar family. I would say, like, not all families can claim to have been making as history as the Husseini's family. And I think it's great that it's all in writing now, and that book and these diaries are living today for telling these stories. And you said also something important, that I don't think, actually Israel didn't invent colonialism. Zionism is also, has been born and is a product of an era of European colonialism, and is drawing from that, and is drawing a lot from the British colonialism. So there are particular ways that Israel now is imposing its colonialism through apartheid, through genocide. However, as you said, it's very important for the British people in the UK to understand that a large responsibility lies into that past that has been transferred into a very present, where then this responsibility is still very alive. So thank you so much, Sarah.
Thank you.
And for being with us tonight. So I think now we're going to hear again from the great Dana Dajani before we move on to more of the call to action by Ben Jamal and the closing of this event. So without further ado, because we also want to be mindful of all of you, of your time, and we want to stick to the hour. So Dana, if you would make us the pleasure to perform to us your other poem that's called I Choose to Be Palestinian.
Yes, thank you. So I released this poem during the Sheikh Jarrah protests, and now more than ever, as Yas was saying, we are in our hundreds, we are in our millions, and we are all Palestinian. This is I Choose to Be Palestinian. I choose to be Palestinian. I choose, I can, because my identity is my own to create. It's no one's business to affirm, bestow, or prescribe upon me. No need to defend my identity because it comes from within. I choose to be Palestinian. There's not a box to check, a club to join, or a lifestyle demographic. Trust me, I choose to be Palestinian, and it has nothing to do with my ancestry. I choose to be Palestinian because I believe in dignity, in justice and humanity, in perseverance, in resilience. Say it. Palestinian. I believe that David beat Goliath. I believe that all human beings are Messiah. I believe that every land is holy, that all people are chosen. No burning bush had to tell me. I choose to be Palestinian. And I believe that we are not broken beyond repair, even after living through our Holocaust, the depths of our despair. النكبة النكسة وهلأ غزة من النهر إلى البحر نحن الفلسطينية. I choose to be Palestinian, even though they don't play fair. They don't play. They don't. They. I choose to be Palestinian with or without a nationality. I choose that identity. I can, because my identity is my own to create, and I choose not to be the victim, and I resist the fate they perpetuate. I choose to be Palestinian and step into a new way where the graves of Jerusalem aren't dug up as prime real estate to witness the trumpets of Judgment Day. Tourists flock in mass, religious holiday, a photo to take, unholy vacation, while locals are shepherded through checkpoints and barriers. We could have heaven on earth if we stopped waiting for a savior. Let it start in Palestine. Is the name triggering? Very well. Let's call it something else then. Won't change the fact that I choose to be Palestinian. I choose to be Palestinian and give a voice to this pain and this love and this hope and this invitation to change. I choose to find a common meeting place. We already inhabit it. Say it. Say it. We are all Palestinian. Ashat Palestine. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, so thank you so much, Dana, to be with us, to have been with us tonight. Do follow the work of Dana. Really very powerful. And I think it's so beautiful to see, stories being put in this such an art form, even in such a simple way. So powerful. So thank you, Dana, and we'll keep in touch. All right. So I think before, a few closing comments, we are welcoming our last guest tonight, who's Ben Jamal. Ben Jamal is a British Palestinian. Ben Jamal is the director of the Palestine Solidarity Campaign. And Ben Jamal will leave us with, with all these very powerful testimonies and yours. We want to end in making sure people go with what to do next.
Thank you, Ines. And let me begin by thanking all of my fellow Palestinians for being with us tonight and sharing their stories. Every person you have heard speak tonight is a child of the Nakba. Every living Palestinian is a survivor of the Nakba. But tonight, even this darkest moment of the ongoing Nakba, as our brothers and sisters in Gaza confront genocide, we also gather to recognize and celebrate 76 years of the Palestinian refusal to succumb, 76 years of Palestinian ongoing resistance to erasure. And tonight I think of my own family story. Maybe I begin with a story I have told before. It came to me again 2 weeks ago when we led 200,000 people into Hyde Park on our latest march calling for an end to genocide. And I recounted that day as I stood on the stage the fact that the very first rally for Palestine that took place in Britain also took place in Hyde Park in 1921, 103 years ago. It was held to support a delegation of Palestinians who had come from mandated Palestine to the heart of the empire to try to persuade Winston Churchill, who was then Secretary of State for the colonies, to overturn the Balfour Declaration. Now, the reason I know this is because the secretary to that delegation was a man called Shibli Jamal, who was my great uncle. He spoke at that rally in Hyde Park 103 years, almost to the day before I spoke in the same arena. When he returned from that delegation to Palestine, he wrote an essay in which he described what would be the outcome of that delegation's failure to persuade the British government to change course. He wrote that the course of history was set. One people would inevitably come to dominate over another, who would become underlings in their own homeland. Fast forward 27 years, and my great uncle, along with all of my family, including my grandparents, were forced to flee from their homes, beautiful mansions. They were a wealthy family in Talbia, West Jerusalem. Talbia is just a few short miles from the village of Deir Yassin, when on April the 9th, 1948, Zionist militias massacred over 100 Palestinians. All of my family homes were stolen. One, the home of another great uncle, became the headquarters for a while of the Irgun, one of the militias who carried out that massacre at Deir Yassin. I am a British Palestinian, like Sarah, the child of a Palestinian father and an English mother. I was born, schooled, and grew up in England. And so rightly, my focus as a solidarity activist is here in the UK. And as a solidarity activist and as the director of the largest Palestine solidarity organization in Europe, I know what my task is and what your task is as solidarity activists. What Palestinians require from us is unchanging. It is that we end the complicity of our government, our public bodies, our companies and corporations, without whose support Israel could not sustain its system of oppression. Right now, that demand is echoing in towns and cities across the UK led by PSC branches as they picket banks and arms factories. It is echoing across universities as students set up tents to demand divestment. And on Saturday, we will again be taking this demand to the streets of the capital when we march again in our hundreds of thousands. My great uncle Shibley's story reminds all of us of the depths and lengths of the complicity we need to end. Shibley's story also reminds us of the endurance of the Palestinian people and of their ongoing victory over erasure. When I march on Saturday, I will be joined, as always, by my two daughters, the latest generation, both in their 20s. I'm not as young as I look. Both solidarity activists, both having been solidarity activists since they were able to walk. I have a picture on my wall, as I speak to you now, of the two of them when they were 11 and 7 years old, standing in Trafalgar Square, holding a placard that reads, "Stop starving the Palestinians." Today, as a Palestinian, I thank all of you for everything you do as solidarity activists. Today, I remain inspired by the samud, the endurance and the resilience of my fellow Palestinians. They know, we know, that the struggle is long, but that we will prevail. Remember today the words delivered recently by Ghassan Abu Sitta to students in Glasgow. He said this: "It is your world to fight for. It is your tomorrow to make. We will own tomorrow. Tomorrow will be a Palestinian day." March with us on Saturday. Campaign with us in the weeks and months ahead. Sign today the e-action we have sent again to the government calling for a ban on arms sales. It will be posted in the chat. Let us work with our brothers and sisters in Palestine to build that new tomorrow, to create that new day on which the walls of apartheid are finally demolished, the day on which the sun will rise over a free Jerusalem, over a free Haifa, and over a free Gaza, and a day on which the Palestinians living in exile will finally be free to return home. In the words of the poem you are about to hear, we have not forgotten, we will not forget. Veins like roots of olive trees, we will return. That is not a threat, not a wish, or a hope, or a dream, but a promise. Onwards together to freedom, justice, and equality.
Thank you, Ben. I'll let Iyas close this event tonight. But I just want to say to everyone who's listening from the UK or elsewhere, if you're, not a Palestinian, or if you're a Palestinian, but if you have the space and the privilege, do fight, continue to fight, campaign, join a solidarity campaign, fight for justice and freedom, because you can. So thank you very much, everyone. And yes, it was a pleasure, and with the PSC colleagues to do this event together.
The pleasure and the privilege, as I said before, Ines, was all mine. I'd like to thank Ghada, I'd like to thank Sarah, I'd like to thank Nida, I'd like to thank Dana, especially as we mentioned before. I would like to thank Amal for joining us so fresh out of Gaza. And obviously I would really like to thank my co-host Ines for pulling us all into shape and making this all happen. Thank you very much for that. It's a genuine privilege to have been with you all. And thank you all on YouTube for joining us and listening. Our Samud, which has been referenced, is legendary. We've heard words like endurance, we've heard words like steadfastness, resistance, refusal to succumb. All of these are different permutations, different faces of Palestinian Samud. But I'd also like to, as we're talking about the Nakba, I'd like to remind us all that our Samud is born of hope. You don't display steadfastness and endurance if you don't have hope. I mentioned that my father passed away 2 years ago at the age of 94. And shortly before he died, he had a conversation with me. And he told me that he was sure that we would be back in Palestine. And he said he was sure it wouldn't be him. He said he hoped it would maybe be me, but that it would definitely be my son Omar, my eldest son Omar, in his generation. And what I'm seeing from our young men in Gaza on the West Bank, and what I'm seeing in campuses from around the world with Palestinians and the youth that are standing in solidarity, is absolutely an expression of hope. And so for me, the other side of the Nakba is hope. And as much as our brothers and sisters in Palestine inspire us all, we also hear from them that our solidarity increases their strength. And so I always say, as a Palestinian, it is a privilege to be joined by so many non-Palestinians who are with us because they are humans of conscience, because you are humans of conscience. And I'd like you to always remember, following what Ben said and his calls for specific things that you may do, that it is your activism that also feeds our Samud. And so on that, I would like to close with a poem from the inimitable and the indefatigable Remi Kanazi. If we can have that play, please. Thank you very much for being with us this evening.
She was scared. 7 months pregnant. Guns pointed at temples. Tears dropping, stomach cusped, back bent. Dirt pathways leading to dispossession. Rocking boats, waves crashing, people rushing, falling over each other, packing into small spaces. Like memories. Her home. Mandated, occupied, cleansed, conquered. Terrorizers sat on hills, sniping children. Neighbors fled on April 10th. Word game of massacre. They stayed. Didn't fight, didn't flee, shells and bombs bursting in air like anthems, prayed for the dead, with priests and imams, prayed for the living, looking over shoulders for the Irgun and Haganah. She's a warrior, raised life, planted trees, painted fruit, as if the road was her garden, orphaned twice, had birth from Palestine. Whispered Yafa till final breath, never knew essence until she found emptiness, 48 ways to flee, and she found Beirut. Bullet holes in buildings, reminder of home, but not home. Years later, daughter sat on hills in the south, dreaming of breaking water never touched, thinks of their mother, that warrior, how battles still rage here and abroad, orchards flourished, propagandists called them barons, land expropriated for Europeans who called religion ethnicity, not native, not from here, plant flags, call it home, rename cities and villages, wiping, cleaning, cleansing memory that this is not theirs. Passed away August 22nd, 2009. Frail hands shook, lip trembled, didn't want to die, but suffered decades. She will speak Arabic, broken English, wounded words and murmurs, her eyes close, but every so often they blink brilliance. Memories that cannot be erased, uprooted, or stolen. She has not forgotten. We have not forgotten. We will not forget. Veins like roots of olive trees, we will return. That is not a threat, not a wish, a hope, or a dream, but a promise.